she found out her husband had a second family, only to realize she wasn't the only one hiding something. Episode 2. Cracks in the Foundation. Following the devastating discovery of Daniel's betrayal, Rachel's meticulously curated life rapidly descended into a quiet nightmare. Every waking moment was filled with agonizing effort, every smile forced, every laugh carefully rehearsed, each perfectly crafted image on her blog hiding the profound heartbreak tearing her apart inside. She was determined to maintain an unshakable facade of normalcy, driven by a desperate hope that her children wouldn't sense the storm raging silently beneath their mother's gentle exterior. Yet despite her strength, Rachel felt herself slowly breaking. Each morning, she meticulously applied makeup to cover dark circles born of sleepless nights spent pacing the empty rooms of their picture-perfect home. Each stroke of mascara, every dab of concealer, felt like an act of survival, a fragile mask hiding eyes hollowed by grief and betrayal. Her carefully chosen clothing became a protective armor, meticulously chosen to disguise the vulnerability and pain that seeped from her very pores. Daily routines that once brought comfort now felt empty, mechanical acts devoid of joy or meaning. Preparing breakfast for her children became almost unbearable, as innocent questions about Daniel, his next trip, his expected return home, pierced Rachel's heart mercilessly. She smiled softly, calmly reassuring her children with promises that their father would soon be back, even as her voice trembled under the unbearable weight of his deceit. Every interaction with Daniel became a cruel performance. Each tender touch of his hand, each gentle word whispered lovingly in her ear, filled Rachel with nausea and silent fury. He continued to behave as if nothing had changed, expertly masking his deception with familiar charm, unaware that Rachel saw straight through his lies. Every evening he spent at home was torture, each shared meal filled with forced smiles and stilted conversations as Rachel struggled silently beneath her calm surface. Yet Rachel's suffering wasn't confined only to her interactions with Daniel. At night, she lay wide awake, tormented by relentless doubts and questions that gnawed painfully at her heart. Each passing day intensified her fears, making her question every memory of their marriage. How many vacations, romantic dinners, anniversaries had Daniel spent secretly wishing he were elsewhere? How many times had he lied effortlessly, his eyes betraying nothing but affection and sincerity? The painful realization that she could no longer discern truth from lies shattered Rachel's self-confidence, making her question everything she had ever known. To make matters worse, Rachel's relationships outside the home also began showing cracks. Her social media posts, once filled with joyful images and confident captions, now felt hollow and superficial. Her closest friends began noticing subtle changes. Rachel's forced smiles, her brief silences, the shadows behind her carefully composed eyes. Gentle inquiries from concerned friends increased her anxiety, forcing Rachel deeper into isolation, terrified that her carefully hidden pain might become visible, exposing the devastating truth she fought so hard to conceal. Even Rachel's children began sensing their mother's hidden turmoil. Her eldest daughter, Emily, perceptive beyond her years, started withdrawing into herself, silently worrying whenever she noticed her mother's distracted gaze or trembling hands. Rachel's heart ached deeply, consumed by guilt at the realization that her pain was unintentionally spilling over, despite her efforts to protect them. Rachel's days turned into a series of emotional battles she fought quietly and desperately. Each moment became a delicate balancing act, attempting to uphold the illusion of perfection while silently drowning in her grief and resentment. Her own reflection in the mirror soon became unrecognizable. No longer a woman filled with hope and joy, but someone hollow, drained by emotional exhaustion and haunted by betrayal. Amid this chaos, Rachel realized that merely holding her broken family together wasn't enough. She needed answers, no matter how painful or destructive they might be. Daniel's deception had fractured their foundation, But Rachel knew the worst damage lay hidden deeper beneath the surface. A haunting, relentless whisper inside warned her that Daniel's betrayal wasn't a single act. It was merely the first thread of a tangled web she was terrified to unravel. Yet Rachel knew she had no choice but to follow these threads to wherever they might lead, even if doing so meant risking everything she had ever known or loved. The path ahead was dark, uncertain, and frighteningly lonely. Still, deep inside, she felt a growing strength born of pain, grief, and fierce maternal instinct. An unstoppable determination to uncover every hidden secret, confront every painful truth, and rebuild a life free from lies and manipulation, no matter the personal cost. Little did Rachel know her painful quest for truth would soon uncover even darker secrets lurking in Daniel's shadow, truths that would irrevocably transform not only her present, but also the buried past she had desperately hoped would remain hidden forever. The package of baby clothes that Rachel received was kept in her closet for nearly a week. Then she moved it to the kitchen. It sat on the counter like a landmine, its presence humming with the potential to explode Rachel's world even further. When she finally opened it again and read Daniel's handwriting, "I can't wait to meet you, my little angel. Love, Daddy." Something inside her snapped, not in rage, not even in grief, but in a frightening stillness that crept up her spine and left her shaking. That delicate handwriting was more than just a lie. It was proof. And the tiny clothes, lovingly folded and wrapped in tissue, weren't meant for their children. They were meant for someone else's child, someone else's life, someone else's womb. Rachel barely slept that night. She paced the length of her home like a ghost, barefoot, breathless, and betrayed, dragging her fingertips along the walls like she was trying to make sense of a space that had suddenly become unrecognizable. Every creak in the floorboards sounded louder, every shadow longer. Her mind replayed every business trip, every emergency flight, and every night Daniel had come home late smelling faintly of cologne and distant lies. There was no more room for denial. She needed answers, but Daniel would never willingly hand them over. That's when her mind returned to the name, Monica Reed. The return address on the package was just outside the city, and she'd seen it before. Daniel had once left it on the kitchen table, scribbled casually on an envelope, claiming it belonged to an old consulting client. She had believed him. Now she knew better. At sunrise, Rachel sat at the kitchen table, sipping cold coffee as she composed a message in her journal. Not to herself, but to Monica. Words scratched through her mind as she planned a meeting under the guise of a philanthropic outreach campaign. "Hi, Monica. I'm part of a women's community initiative that supports mothers through childbirth and early parenting. I'd love to connect with you. Would you have time to chat over tea this week?" A total lie, but one that might get her through Monica's front door without suspicion. Rachel hated herself for the deceit, but what other option did she have? Telling Monica the truth out of the blue might devastate her, or worse, push her into Daniel's arms with warnings that would close off Rachel's only chance at exposure. As she sent the message from an alternate email address, Rachel's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Her stomach churned. Was she doing the right thing? Was this ethical? Or was she becoming as manipulative as Daniel, spinning a falsehood for personal gain? The thought stung her pride. But this wasn't about pride anymore. This was survival. For her, for her children, and for the pieces of her dignity Daniel hadn't yet crushed. Later that day, Rachel pulled into the quiet suburban neighborhood where Monica lived, a place that felt almost fictional in its tranquility. Well-kept lawns stretched out on either side of the street, flower boxes spilled over with vibrant colors. The air was filled with the faint, rhythmic clatter of a nearby wind chime, dancing against the late afternoon breeze. It was picturesque, safe, The kind of neighborhood where people trusted each other, where children played outside past dinner, and where the biggest scandal was probably a misplaced recycling bin. Rachel sat in the car longer than she intended, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Across the yard stood Monica's home. It wasn't large, but it exuded warmth. Planters on the porch, pastel curtains fluttering behind the windows, and a row of children's shoes neatly stacked just outside the door. Every innocent detail stabbed at Rachel's heart. This was the home Daniel had chosen for his second life. A life he'd kept hidden so expertly, so shamelessly, that Rachel now questioned whether she'd ever known the man she'd married at all. After a few grounding breaths, she opened the door and forced herself out, her heels clicking softly against the brick walkway. The air smelled faintly of lavender. Her legs felt like stone. Her hand hovered near the doorbell longer than it should have. And then, before she could talk herself out of it, she rang. The door opened moments later, and there she was. Monica, soft-featured, kind-eyed. Her face lit up with polite curiosity. She was younger than Rachel had imagined, her eyes radiating innocence and warmth, a woman completely oblivious to the devastating truth Rachel had come to uncover. But Rachel's attention was quickly drawn to something else: Monica's visibly swollen belly, an undeniable and heart-wrenching sign of her pregnancy. Rachel's vision blurred briefly with tears she struggled fiercely to hold back. "Hi there," Monica said with a smile that instantly made Rachel want to cry. "Can I help you?" Rachel swallowed the lump in her throat. "Hi, I know this is a little unexpected. I'm so sorry to drop by unannounced. My name is Rachel. I run a small local blog focused on women's health, motherhood, and family support. We've recently launched a feature on expecting mothers in the community, and I came across your name. I thought you might be interested." Monica's expression shifted to one of pleasant surprise, with a hint of cautious hesitation. "Oh, that's interesting. How did you come across my name, if you don't mind me asking?" Rachel had prepared for this. "A friend of mine volunteers at the local midwife clinic. She mentioned a few wonderful moms-to-be who might have stories worth sharing. She didn't give many details, but I followed a few leads." It was a lie, every syllable of it, but it rolled out smoothly. Monica softened. "Oh, wow, that's sweet of her. I mean, sure, I suppose I could chat for a bit. I'm just about to put some tea on if you'd like to come in." Rachel nodded. "That would be lovely. Thank you." As Monica stepped aside to let her in, Rachel took her first steps into the heart of Daniel's second life. The inside of the house radiated comfort. Family photos hung lovingly on the walls, a soft couch lined with pastel pillows, children's drawings taped to the refrigerator. On the coffee table sat a half-assembled baby mobile, its tiny felt animals stitched with loving detail. And then she saw it. A photograph? Monica, Daniel, and a boy no older than 6. All three smiling beneath a beach umbrella, sand clinging to their feet, Daniel's hand protectively around Monica's waist. Rachel's heart clenched so violently that she thought she might faint. That was the same weekend Daniel had told her he was stuck in Houston for a corporate merger. He had sent a photo of himself in a hotel gym. A hotel gym! Rachel felt herself smile stiffly as she sat on the edge of the couch, legs crossed, palms sweating. She was officially inside the lie now, fully immersed in the warm, handcrafted life that Daniel had built with another woman. Monica returned moments later with 2 cups of steaming chamomile tea and sat across from her, her belly now more visible as she adjusted herself comfortably. "So, tell me about this blog," Monica said, placing her cup down gently. "I'm all ears." Rachel stared at her for a moment longer than necessary. This woman, so kind, so trusting, was about to have her world torn apart, and she had no idea. Rachel took a sip of tea she couldn't taste, smiled with lips that trembled just slightly, and began to speak. Rachel sat on Monica's floral print couch, Her legs crossed tightly, one hand wrapped rigidly around the delicate porcelain teacup she barely sipped from. The scent of chamomile hung in the air like a fragile veil, comforting but utterly misplaced given the turmoil raging inside her. Every ticking second felt stretched, as if the universe itself had paused to witness what was about to unfold. Rachel had come searching for truth, but now that she was seated in the heart of it, the weight of that decision pressed on her like a collapsing ceiling. Monica leaned back in her armchair, smiling as she cradled her baby bump with absent affection. "It's been a roller coaster, this pregnancy," she said with a laugh. "But Daniel's been amazing. He's so attentive. I honestly don't know how I would have gotten through these last few months without him." Rachel's knuckles whitened around the teacup. Her mouth formed a polite smile, but it felt as distant as a stranger's reflection in glass. She wanted to scream. "Daniel has been attending Lamaze classes with you while lying to me about back-to-back strategy meetings in New York." Instead, she tilted her head gently and said, "That's wonderful. It's really important to have support during this time." Monica beamed. "He's been flying in and out so much. His work is absolutely insane these days. But even with everything going on, he always makes time for me and Jaden." She gestured toward a photo of a cheerful boy with curly hair and Daniel's unmistakable eyes beaming beside a Christmas tree. Rachel's stomach twisted as the pieces began clicking together with brutal clarity. That same Christmas, Daniel had told her he couldn't make it home in time from London due to a blizzard. Rachel had spent the day crying quietly in their bedroom, telling the children Daddy was sad to miss it too. Meanwhile, he had been building gingerbread houses with Monica and their son. "Jaden's your son?" Rachel asked softly, voice trembling. Monica nodded with pride. "He just turned 6. We're throwing him a little party next weekend. Nothing too big. Just a few friends, cake, maybe a bouncy castle if Daniel can pull some strings." The date hit Rachel like a punch to the gut. Next weekend. That was the same weekend Daniel had told Rachel he would be speaking at a global business symposium in Dubai, an event he said would be live-streamed but not recorded. She remembered the hours she had spent rehearsing ways to explain his absence to their children, hoping the Christmas photos would make up for his silence. And now Daniel was planning to bounce on inflatables and slice birthday cake somewhere in the suburbs while pretending to be unreachable. Rachel's hands began to tremble, her teacup clinking slightly against the saucer as she lowered it quickly to the table. Her throat tightened. She couldn't speak. Not yet. Monica, ever sweet and unaware, reached for her own cup and sighed. "I know he works hard. He always tells me he wants to build a future for our family. He's so private about it, though. Sometimes I wish he could just slow down and breathe, but he says he's close to finishing some kind of long-term project that will finally give him more time with us." Rachel nodded numbly. A long-term project. That was the same excuse Daniel had used to explain why he hadn't been sleeping in their bedroom recently. That and the jet lag, or the late Zoom meetings, or just needing space. Suddenly Monica chuckled. "Sorry, I'm rambling. You came here to interview me, and I've just been blabbing about my life." Rachel took a breath, finding her voice despite the lump of betrayal lodged in her throat. "Not at all," she said quietly. "It's good to hear how involved he is." Monica smiled gently. "We've been married 7 years this fall. It hasn't always been easy. Daniel's job keeps him away a lot. But when he's here, he makes up for it. He's always had a way of making things feel special, like when we went to Vancouver for our anniversary. It was raining the entire weekend, but he brought candles, wine, even booked this little massage cottage by the water. It felt like a honeymoon." Rachel blinked hard. Vancouver. Daniel had told her he was attending a 4-day board retreat at Whistler during that exact time. He had even brought home a Whistler mug and pamphlet as souvenirs. Rachel had thanked him, kissed him, and boiled tea in that mug every morning for weeks. And now, the mug felt like poison. Monica went on to describe cozy Friday nights, slow dances in the kitchen. Daniel massaging her swollen ankles after long days. It sounded too much like Rachel's own memories, almost plagiarized, except now she realized those weren't just her memories. Daniel had duplicated affection like a man running a con. He'd manufactured intimacy on parallel tracks, switching hats and homes like it was a twisted performance of husband roulette. Rachel's body felt numb, her mind floating somewhere above the ceiling, watching all of this from a place so surreal it barely felt like her life anymore. But her hands betrayed her, twitching slightly in her lap. Her eyes welled up. Monica tilted her head, noticing the shift. "Rachel, are you okay?" Rachel bit the inside of her cheek so hard she tasted blood, but she nodded, blinking quickly. "Yes, sorry, I just didn't expect to hear something so beautiful." "You're lucky, Monica. He sounds like he really loves you?" It was the cruelest truth she had ever spoken. Monica smiled softly, her fingers rubbing the edge of her belly. "I think he does. I really do." Rachel stood up. She couldn't take another second. "Thank you," she said, brushing imaginary crumbs from her lap. "This has been really illuminating. I think I have everything I need." Monica rose with her, still smiling. "Please let me know when the article goes up. It's nice to know there are spaces highlighting real motherhood. I think that's beautiful." Rachel nodded, trying to keep her eyes from spilling over. "You're right. It is real, and you deserve all of it." They walked to the door in silence. But just before Rachel stepped outside, Monica said brightly, "Oh, before I forget, Daniel will be home early next week. Maybe I can connect you two for a quote. He's never really met anyone from the blog world, and he's super private, but I bet he'd make an exception." Rachel turned slowly. Her voice, though soft, rang with hollow finality. "I'm sure he would." As the door closed behind her, Rachel stepped onto the porch and inhaled sharply, then exhaled with a ragged sob as she collapsed against the side of her car. Her hands shook uncontrollably. Her mascara streaked. Her chest felt like it was imploding. But through the flood of agony, one thing was painfully, irreversibly clear. Daniel had never loved just her. He had loved them all, or worse, he hadn't loved anyone at all. And now Rachel knew, if she wanted to survive this, she'd have to stop grieving and start preparing. Because this wasn't heartbreak, this was war. The moment the door to Monica's home clicked softly shut behind her, Rachel staggered back toward her car like a woman emerging from the wreckage of a collapsed building. Her heels crunched against the gravel driveway, but she didn't notice. The weight of what she had just seen, what she had just felt, had left her hollow, fragile, almost ghost-like. As soon as she slid into the driver's seat and closed the door, the sobs erupted from deep within her, raw and uncontrollable. Her fingers gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white with tension, as her entire body convulsed beneath the overwhelming pressure of grief. Daniel's betrayal had not been a single wound. It had been death by 1,000 cuts. And Monica, with her sweet smile and innocent trust, had unknowingly handed Rachel the sharpest blade of all, the truth. Images from inside the house haunted her in a relentless loop. The ultrasound photo, the pictures of a family Rachel had never known existed, the sound of Monica's voice as she described a man who no longer resembled the Daniel Rachel once adored. The home was modest but full of warmth, of laughter, of life, everything Rachel had fought to preserve, unknowingly alone. Each moment she had spent protecting her children, loving Daniel, working to keep their family whole. It all felt like a cruel parody now. A choking sob escaped her lips as she rested her forehead against the steering wheel, her tears falling hot and heavy onto her lap. The pain was no longer abstract. It was physical, burning in her throat, tightening in her chest, making it hard to breathe. And yet, through the haze of devastation, something stirred inside her, a slow building fury laced with a mother's resolve. She had been deceived, yes, betrayed, humiliated, broken. But she was not weak. She was not finished. Rachel slowly leaned back in her seat and stared through the windshield with swollen, tear-rimmed eyes. The world outside looked no different. Children's chalk still colored the sidewalk. A neighbor across the street was watering flowers. But inside her, everything had changed. She wasn't the same woman who had arrived at Monica's door an hour ago. Wiping her face with trembling hands, Rachel reached for her purse and pulled out the small note that had accompanied the baby clothes Daniel had so carelessly delivered to her address. His handwriting mocked her now. "I can't wait to meet you, my little angel. Love, Daddy." Her jaw tightened. "Love, Daddy," she whispered aloud, the words catching like fire in her throat. Then louder, bitter now. "Daddy to who, Daniel? Daddy to who?" A twisted laugh burst from her chest, bitter and wounded, a sound that did not belong to the woman she used to be. She felt dizzy, unmoored, but she also felt awake. As though for the first time, the fog had cleared. She couldn't undo what Daniel had done. She couldn't protect herself from the betrayal that had already ripped through her life like a storm. But she could stop pretending. She could stop protecting the man who had systematically destroyed her. And most importantly, she could fight. Rachel took a deep breath, grounding herself in the present. Her eyes were still red and glassy, her mascara long ruined, but her spine had straightened. Her heart, though fractured, was beating with a new rhythm, one fueled not by denial, but by determination. "No more lies, Daniel," she whispered fiercely, her voice hoarse but unwavering. "You think you've buried everything, but I'm digging." She started the engine, her hands still trembling, and drove away from the tidy little street where a second version of her husband had been living in plain sight. As the house disappeared from the rearview mirror, so too did any remnants of the illusion she'd once fought so hard to preserve. But Rachel Carter had no idea that Daniel's worst secrets still lay in the dark, more tangled, more dangerous, and more intimate than she had ever imagined. And as she turned onto the highway, unaware of the next storm barreling toward her life, one question echoed in her mind like a curse. If Daniel could lie about a second life, what else could he be hiding? When she arrived home, Rachel barely made it through the front door before the force of everything she had held inside came crashing down like a tidal wave. As the door clicked shut behind her, sealing her once safe haven in silence, she stood paralyzed, her keys slipping from her fingers and clattering to the floor like a final punctuation mark on the life she thought she knew. Her knees buckled and she sank to the cold hardwood, the perfectly curated space around her now feeling foreign, soulless. The walls that once echoed with laughter and family life now seemed to mock her with their stillness. Then came the tears. Not the gentle kind that silently slipped down cheeks, but a storm, guttural and raw. She wept from somewhere deep in her body, from that sacred place where trust lives, where love had once taken root and flourished. Now it was barren, burned, desecrated. Her sobs tore from her throat like a wounded animal, curling her body inward as if trying to hold herself together, even as everything inside her shattered beyond recognition. Daniel's betrayal wasn't just infidelity. It was an annihilation of identity. Her entire past had been rewritten in a single afternoon, every memory retroactively stained by the truth. The vacations, the anniversaries, the lazy Sunday mornings tangled in sheets and whispered promises. It had all been a lie, and now those memories didn't bring warmth. They brought nausea. She could still hear Monica's voice, sweet and trusting, obliviously describing her shared life with Rachel's husband. The beach trips, the holidays, the way Daniel would kiss her swollen belly and talk to the unborn child as if he'd been dreaming of its arrival forever. Rachel pressed her palms against her ears, trying to block out the sound, but it echoed louder in her mind. The ultrasound, the baby clothes, the note written in Daniel's unmistakable handwriting. "I can't wait to meet you, my little angel. Love, Daddy." Those words had been meant for someone else, for a child who would grow up believing Daniel Carter was a good man. Rachel doubled over, her arms wrapping tightly around her middle, trying to quiet the screams she couldn't release out loud. Her body shook violently from the grief that poured out of her like water through broken glass. Her breath hitched in uneven bursts, her mascara smudged, her blouse soaked with tears. The picture-perfect image of her life, the one she had built so carefully on Instagram and in her blog, was now grotesquely distorted, like a shattered mirror that no longer reflected anything familiar. For years, she had labored to create a sanctuary, a flawless home, polished children, a marriage she proudly showcased like a well-lit storefront. She had become a brand, a woman adored by strangers online, envied by friends, and praised in church pews. And now she was curled on the floor, broken by the man who had co-starred in that illusion. She should have seen it, she thought. The signs, the inconsistencies, the missed calls, the vague explanations about last-minute trips. But she hadn't wanted to see them. She had chosen trust, chosen love. And now trust had left her humiliated, and love had left her destitute. But even as the grief threatened to drown her, a quiet ember stirred somewhere deep beneath the wreckage of her spirit. This wasn't the end. She wasn't done. No, she hadn't fought to build the life she had, flawed as it now seemed, just to crumble under Daniel's deception. She may have been blindsided, but she would not be buried. Rachel slowly sat upright, her body trembling but her mind beginning to clear. Her face streaked with tears and makeup, hardened with resolve. She wasn't just mourning a broken marriage. She was mourning her own erasure, and she would not let it be permanent. She would rise. Still, the fear lingered. Because what if this was just the beginning? What if the truth she had unearthed at Monica's house was merely the first crack in a dam ready to burst? Daniel was cunning. Too cunning. He hadn't just betrayed her heart. He had played a long game. He had crafted alternate realities, parallel families, divergent lives with the skill of a seasoned liar. If he could hide a wife and children, what else could he be hiding? Rachel's fingers gripped the edge of the console table as she hoisted herself to her feet, her legs still weak but her back straighter. She walked slowly to the mirror in the hallway, the same one she used every morning to check her reflection before stepping out into the world. This time she didn't fix her hair. She didn't apply fresh lip gloss or straighten her blouse. She stared into her own eyes, swollen and red, and whispered to herself, not as a victim, but as a woman being reborn in fire. "This ends with me, and I swear on everything I've lost, he will never see me crumble again." Rachel didn't yet know where this path would lead, what dark truths were waiting to ambush her, what betrayals still pulsed beneath the surface. But she knew one thing with chilling certainty. The war had begun, and she was no longer afraid to fight. Rachel sat in silence on the living room floor, the once vibrant heart of her home now a hollow chamber echoing with the ghosts of shattered illusions. The polished hardwood beneath her felt cold and foreign, just like everything else around her. The framed family photos smiling down from the walls, the velvet throw blanket draped neatly across the couch, the soft scent of the vanilla candle Daniel had given her for their anniversary, now bitterly clinging to the air like a cruel joke. She could not move. She didn't want to. The silence pressed down like a lead weight, as if the entire house had become complicit in Daniel's betrayal, mocking her with every perfectly placed object and every spotless surface she had once taken pride in. The space that once held laughter, warmth, and whispered dreams had morphed into a stage where betrayal had performed its most devastating act. The tears she had shed in Monica's driveway had barely scratched the surface. Now, alone, they poured with reckless abandon, unfiltered and raw, sobs ripping through her body like thunder. Rachel let herself break. She screamed once, just once, but it was enough to fill the void with every ounce of rage, pain, and humiliation she had bottled up since the moment she opened that package of baby clothes. The sound startled even her. It was animalistic, an agonizing cry from a woman whose life had been dissected and discarded like an old dress no longer in season. She crawled to the couch and curled into herself like a child, clutching a pillow so tightly her knuckles turned white. The betrayal didn't just feel emotional, it was physical, visceral. Her chest ached, her stomach twisted, her skin felt too tight. It was as if grief itself had wrapped its hands around her neck and whispered, "You're mine now." Images of Monica's soft, glowing smile pierced her mind again and again. The joy in that woman's eyes, the way she had so casually spoken Daniel's name as though it belonged to her, as though Rachel had somehow been the intruder in a life that was never hers to begin with. And yet, Monica had no idea either. They were both just characters in a cruel performance Daniel had orchestrated like a sadistic playwright. The injustice of it all seared Rachel's heart. How dare he walk through the world with such ease, wearing charm like armor, while she lay here, shattered into unrecognizable pieces. Anger rose slowly now, rising like fire beneath her ribs, burning away the paralysis. Her pain began to reshape itself into something sharper, something stronger. She sat up slowly, dragging herself to the nearby credenza where she had once kept small mementos of her and Daniel's life together. Concert tickets, postcards from European business trips, tiny notes written on hotel stationery that once felt romantic but now reeked of deceit. One by one, she picked them up with trembling hands and stared at each one until the memory it held crumbled. Then she tore it, slowly, methodically, like purging poison. It was not enough to scream. It was not enough to cry. She needed something more. She needed clarity. She needed power. She needed the truth, no matter how wretched, no matter how soul-piercing. She stood and looked around the room, not with despair this time, but with new eyes. She wasn't just a broken wife anymore. She was a woman who had survived the first explosion and was now crawling through the debris with grit in her lungs and vengeance pulsing in her veins. Rachel knew the storm wasn't over. It had only just begun. And when it came, she wouldn't cower. She'd meet it head on. Because whatever was left of her life, she would fight for it, rebuild it, reinvent it. But first, she would let the silence settle again, this time not as a symbol of emptiness, but as a calm before a war. The house sat in a heavy, oppressive silence as twilight bled into night. The lamps cast long, flickering shadows across the walls, and the low hum of the refrigerator was the only sound punctuating the air thick with tension. Rachel sat in the corner of the living room, motionless, her body curled into itself like a fortress barely holding its walls. Her tear-swollen eyes stared blankly at the floor, but her mind was a battlefield. Flashes of Monica's kindness, the ultrasound image, the baby clothes, Daniel's lies. It all stormed her thoughts in relentless, vengeful waves. And then she heard it. The soft, automatic purr of the garage door rising, followed by the low thud of car doors. Then keys jingling. Daniel was home. Rachel didn't move. She didn't even blink. Her heart pounded, but her body felt numb. She listened to his footsteps approaching, confident, measured, almost rehearsed, like a man walking into the comfort of a life he'd long since mastered. He stepped inside without hesitation, humming faintly under his breath as he hung his coat and dropped his keys in the dish by the door, unaware, or perhaps uncaring, of the storm that awaited him in the next room. "Hey, babe," he called casually, voice smooth like velvet stretched over stone. "Sorry I'm late. Crazy day. You wouldn't believe the mess the Zurich office made with the funding reports." He trailed off as he stepped into the living room and saw Rachel sitting there, still as a statue, cloaked in shadow. His eyes flicked to her, reading her body language the way he always did, always calculating. And yet something was off. Her silence wasn't the usual exhausted kind. It wasn't anger either. It was cold. "Everything okay?" he asked lightly, stepping closer, like a man inching toward a dog that might bite. Rachel said nothing. She didn't even look at him. And that's when Daniel's carefully rehearsed demeanor cracked ever so slightly. He smiled, a weak, hesitant thing, and leaned down to kiss her cheek, his lips grazing her skin with mechanical familiarity. "I've missed you," he murmured. Rachel's eyes snapped toward him, hollow, sunken, raw. The kind of look that silenced even the most silver-tongued deceiver. She spoke without emotion. "I visited someone today." Daniel's posture stiffened. "Monica Reed," she continued, each syllable landing like a loaded trigger. She was glowing, kind, and very, very pregnant. The smile vanished from Daniel's face like it had been scrubbed off with acid. There was a moment, half a breath, when he said nothing. A brief flicker of something passed across his face. Panic, calculation, rage. Then came the explosion. "How dare you!" he snapped, his voice low and venomous, his body tensing with fury. "How dare you go behind my back? You violated my privacy. You had no right to do that." Rachel stood, slowly, calmly, her every movement deliberate, like someone preparing for war. Her voice, however, remained eerily steady. "You made our entire marriage a lie, Daniel. You paraded around here like a devoted husband while building an entire family across town. I had every right to find out the truth. Every damn right." Daniel's eyes blazed now, his voice trembling with indignation as he lashed back. "Don't act like some martyr, Rachel. Everything you have, this house, your boutique business, your picture-perfect life, it all came from me. You didn't ask questions when the credit cards were paid and the Europe trips were booked. Don't pretend you didn't enjoy the benefits." "The benefits?" Rachel hissed, stepping closer now, her voice rising. "Do you think designer furniture and tropical vacations excuse betrayal? Do you think because you bought me silence with spa days and jewelry that I deserve to be humiliated like this?" "You were happy," he snapped back. "I kept you happy. What else do you want?" "I wanted the truth, Daniel." Their voices now rang through the house like clashing swords, sharp and violent, slicing open the wounds they had both hidden for years. Rachel's pain spilled out in furious waves. Every lonely night he claimed he was working late, every business trip that turned out to be a romantic getaway with someone else, every lie so confidently told that she had questioned her own sanity. Daniel's mask slipped entirely now. Gone was the calm, charismatic husband. In his place stood a man cornered, exposed, and vicious. His eyes narrowed, his jaw clenched. "Fine," he spat. "You want the truth? Monica is my wife. Yes, she's pregnant. Yes, I have a son with her. And there's more you don't know. Much more. But don't act surprised, Rachel. You were content to stay blind. You loved playing the perfect wife so long as you didn't have to see the cracks." Rachel's breath caught painfully, but she didn't cry. Not this time. She stood her ground, rage and betrayal churning inside her like wildfire. "I stayed blind because I trusted you, because I believed in you. And now I see I was just another ornament in your perfect little display." Daniel took a step closer, his voice dropping dangerously. "This isn't over. You think you've got it all figured out? You're in way over your head. Stop digging, Rachel, before you uncover something you really don't want to see." She didn't flinch. Her voice was cold steel now. "Try me." For a long moment, Daniel said nothing. He stared at her. This woman he once thought he controlled, realizing for the first time that the game had changed, that he no longer held the upper hand. Without another word, he turned sharply and stormed out, the slam of the front door reverberating through the house like a final judgment. Silence fell again, but it wasn't the same silence that had filled the house before. This was the silence that follows an earthquake, the hush of a world that had cracked open, waiting for the dust to settle. Rachel stood motionless in the center of the room, trembling, exhausted, but unbroken. Tonight, she had stared down the monster behind the mask. She had drawn the line, made her stand. There would be no turning back now. But in the quiet that followed, one haunting truth remained. Daniel's secrets weren't finished with her yet. The real darkness hadn't even begun. The house had descended into an eerie stillness after Daniel stormed out, leaving behind only the bitter echo of slammed doors and the jagged remnants of rage. Rachel stood in the dim hallway, her heart still racing from the confrontation, her body trembling from the emotional wreckage left in its wake. The silence was deafening, thick with tension and unshed tears, and Rachel's breath came in shallow, uneven gasps. She had barely begun to process the horror of what had just happened when she heard a soft, hesitant rustling coming from the staircase behind her. Rachel turned slowly. There, halfway down the stairs, stood Emily, her eldest daughter, draped in an oversized hoodie. Her small hands gripping the banister so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. Her eyes, wide and glassy, shimmered with a cocktail of fear, confusion, and silent pleading. Her bottom lip trembled as she took a cautious step forward, the sound of her bare feet on the hardwood floor muffled, fragile, like her heart. "Mom?" she asked, her voice small and cracked, barely audible. Rachel's chest tightened as she rushed forward and met her daughter at the foot of the stairs. Emily's frame felt heartbreakingly light in her arms, her body rigid and her face buried in Rachel's shoulder. Rachel felt the hot tears soaking through her blouse almost instantly. "I'm so sorry, baby," she whispered, cradling Emily tighter, as if her embrace could somehow shield her daughter from the chaos that had seeped through the cracks of their once peaceful home. "I didn't mean for you to hear all of that." But Emily shook her head, pulling back just enough to look Rachel in the eyes now swollen and red from too many sleepless nights and too much emotional warfare. "You were screaming," Emily said, her voice fragile and raw. "You and Daddy. You sounded like you hated each other." Rachel froze. The words stung with a truth she wasn't ready to confront, even if her daughter had spoken them innocently. "Is our family breaking?" Emily continued, her voice cracking as the tears welled again. "Is Daddy leaving us?" The question, simple yet devastating, pierced through Rachel like a blade. For all the anguish she had endured that day, nothing had prepared her for the pain of seeing her child, her beautiful, thoughtful, emotionally aware Emily, crushed beneath the weight of a truth she never should have had to carry. Rachel knelt down, leveling her gaze with her daughter's, her hands cupped Emily's face, her thumbs brushing away the tears that refused to stop falling. "Listen to me, sweetheart," Rachel said, her voice trembling with emotion but clear. "What's happening right now? It's not your fault. It's not your brother's fault. And no matter what happens next, your father and I both love you so much that will never, ever change." Emily's brow furrowed as she sniffled, not fully convinced, not old enough to understand betrayal, but certainly old enough to sense the fractures in the home she once believed was unshakable. "Then why do you both look so sad all the time?" she whispered. "Why does Daddy always lie? I hear you crying when you think I'm asleep, and Daddy, he never looks happy when he's here." Rachel's breath hitched, her composure unraveling under the raw honesty of her daughter's observations. Children were sponges, silent witnesses to adult chaos, even when they couldn't fully comprehend its depth. Emily's fears weren't born of one explosive night. They had been growing, quietly, through every subtle shift in tone, every slammed door, every broken promise. Rachel pulled her into another hug, tighter this time, rocking gently as if trying to turn back time. "We're going to be okay," she whispered with fierce conviction she didn't yet feel. "I don't have all the answers right now, but I promise I'll keep you safe. We'll find our way through this." Emily clung to her, not saying a word, just holding on, as if her mother's arms were the last stable thing in a collapsing world. And Rachel, though her own heart was in pieces, held her daughter like she was her lifeline. Because in many ways, she was. The house was still cloaked in the aftermath of the storm. Though Daniel had long since vanished into the night, his presence lingered like a bitter perfume, thick, clinging, impossible to escape. Rachel climbed the stairs with slow, mechanical steps, her limbs heavy with exhaustion, her soul bruised from the violent unraveling of truth. Every stair creaked beneath her weight like a reluctant witness to the collapse of her world. When she entered the bedroom, a fresh wave of nausea swept over her. This room, once her sanctuary, a temple of softness and shared intimacy, now felt foreign, hostile. It no longer smelled like lavender and peace. It reeked of betrayal and secrets. The shadows on the wall seemed to lean in, mocking her with every detail. The tufted headboard they'd picked out together, the monogrammed pillows, the laughing wedding photo perched crookedly on the nightstand. Daniel's hand wrapped around hers like a noose. Rachel sat at the edge of the bed, her spine curled inward as though trying to shield her heart from the invisible blows still raining down. Her hands trembled in her lap. Her throat burned from the words she had screamed. Her ears still rang with Daniel's final threat. "Be careful, Rachel. If you keep digging, you might uncover more than you can handle." That voice, the voice that once lulled her to sleep, the voice that once whispered love into her bones, now played like a recording from a horror film, cold and poisoned. She rubbed her face with both hands, her fingers pressing into her eyes to keep the tears from falling again. But it was useless. Grief was relentless. Her heart, already shredded, pulsed weakly beneath the weight of what she had discovered, and what she feared was still left to discover. Just as she leaned back into the pillows and tried to take a single steady breath, her phone buzzed sharply on the nightstand beside her. The sound was jarring, violent in the quiet. Rachel jumped, her nerves frayed to the edge. The screen lit up her face with a ghostly blue glow. Her breath caught in her throat as she read the display. Unknown number. A tremor ran down her spine. She reached for it with hesitance, her fingers hovering as if the device itself might explode in her hand. Something instinctual told her this wasn't another sales call. This wasn't a friend checking in. This was something else. Finally, she tapped the message open. "You're not alone, Rachel. Daniel Carter has hurt many people. Meet me tomorrow. I have something you need to see." The words slammed into her like a car crash. Rachel bolted upright, her heart launching into a gallop. The phone shook in her grip. She read the message again and again, each repetition deepening the hollow ache in her stomach. Her breath came in shallow bursts. Her thoughts scattered in all directions. Who is this? How do they know my name? How do they know about Daniel? About what I'm going through? Her mind tore through 1,000 terrifying possibilities. Was this someone Daniel had wronged? Another woman? Another wife? A child? A co-conspirator? Was it a trap? Was someone watching her? And then, worse, was Daniel watching them? Rachel felt as if the walls of the room were closing in around her. Her gaze darted toward the window. She instinctively rose and drew the curtains shut, her fingers fumbling with the fabric as if shielding herself from the eyes of some invisible predator. And yet, beneath the panic, there it was, again. That flicker of hope. A stranger, yes. A risk, certainly. But someone knew Daniel, knew the truth, and more importantly, wanted to help her see it. Her thumbs hovered over the keyboard for several seconds before she typed a reply. "Who is this? What do you want?" The response came almost instantly, as if the sender had been waiting in real time for her reply. "Someone who knows Daniel better than you think. If you want answers, meet me tomorrow at the Willow Cafe, 9 a.m. I promise you'll understand once you see me." Rachel's blood ran cold. Someone who knows Daniel better than you think. The words rolled around in her head like thunder. What did they mean? Were they a victim? A partner? A threat? Her curiosity twisted into obsession. She stared at the message for a long, breathless moment. The name of the cafe flickered in her mind. Willow Cafe. She'd passed it dozens of times. Quiet, unassuming. A place where things like this weren't supposed to happen. Slowly, her fingers moved again. "I'll be there." She hit send, then placed the phone on the nightstand, then just sat, alone, trembling, haunted by what might come next. Could this person truly offer her answers, or would they only confirm her worst fears? Could it be Monica reaching out, or Selena, or someone completely unknown? And what exactly were they going to show her? She wrapped her arms around her knees and rocked slightly, trying to soothe the storm in her chest. But there was no calming the torrent now. Her world, already shattered, felt like it had just been cracked open again, and tomorrow promised another explosion. As she gazed toward the mirror across the room, she caught sight of her reflection, a shadow of the woman she used to be. Her eyes were tired, her skin pale, her mouth set in a line of quiet defiance. But beneath that wreckage, something had changed. She was no longer standing at the edge of betrayal, dazed and bleeding. Now, she was walking into the dark, eyes open, fists clenched, ready to face whatever truth stood waiting on the other side of morning. That's the end of episode 2. Secrets have been revealed, masks have fallen. That night, Rachel thought she had seen the worst of Daniel's betrayal. But the deadliest lie of all still waits in the shadows. Episode 3 will drag Rachel deeper into Daniel's darkness than she ever dared imagine. Don't miss